Hey everybody, Nicholas Thomas here. I just finished a great conversation with Matt Dolin, a general manager with Let Us Entertain You, and Ryan LeVeque, a senior revenue manager with Marriott. Both are School of Hospitality Leadership graduates. During our conversation, we covered a wide range of topics, including why it's okay to make mistakes in your job, their day-to-day job functions, the importance of networking, and the role that company culture plays in choosing a post-college employer. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Hospitality Spirit. Recorded live at the Corner Estate in Jackson, this is Dr. Nicholas Thomas with The Hospitality Spirit. Thank you so much for being here today. I am so pleased to be joined with two esteemed DePaul School of Hospitality Leadership graduates, Matt Dolin and Ryan LeVeque. Thank you so much for being here today, joining me on a Sunday of all days. We had to do it on a Sunday because in true hospitality industry fashion, you work trying to find a time where two hospitality industry professionals could join me was difficult, but you are here. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So we have tried to bring in two guests once again. I'm excited. You two are represent two very different segments of the hospitality industry, the food and beverage segment and the hotel segment. And I wanted to bring you two in today because while you're friends outside of work, you also represent two very different sides of the hospitality industry today. And I'm looking forward to our discussion. I want to cover a wide range of subjects, but why don't we start off telling us a little bit about yourself? Matt, why don't you get started? You are a general manager with Let Us Entertain You Group. Specifically, you're the general manager of Ramen San in Fulton Market. But why don't you give us a quick little background about who you are and kind of what you do with Let Us Entertain You?
Yeah, so I've coming up on 10 years with Let Us Entertain You in August. I started as a server at a Big Bowl Chinese and Thai restaurant out in Lincolnshire, kind of where I grew up. And then I transitioned. I ended up coming here to DePaul for school. And while I was here, I wanted to make a transfer from working in the suburbs to working in the city. And Osteria Via Stata was my favorite restaurant to dine at. And so I ended up actually hearing Chef David DiGregorio come in and speak to our class here at DePaul. And after the class, I approached him and asked him for a job. And he said that they were looking for some servers. So it worked out really nicely. I ended up making a transition, which Let Us has as a benefit for their employees. So I went and served at Osteria for 1 year. And then shortly before I graduated from DePaul, I ended up getting a manager job. I managed there, ended up going to AGM and doing the wine and beverage program. And then I transferred it into Ramen San, or Sushi San, for a short stint, and then Ramen San now since we opened last May.
And you knew really from the get-go that you wanted to do F&B.
Yeah.
That's been your passion. I mean, as long as I've known you as a student and now as a leader in hospitality, food and beverage has just been your passion.
It has been, yeah. I got a job at P.F. Chang's, actually, when I was 16, doing some host and carry-out work, and really pretty immediately I fell in love with the industry and just felt that a job that I enjoyed and just wanted to go to day in and day out was the kind of job that I wanted to build a career off of. So I kind of positioned myself from, I guess, age 16 to go into hospitality and to work in food and beverage.
That's great. Ryan, what about you? What do you...
Surprisingly, I actually didn't picture myself going into hospitality from the get-go. I went to school in Indiana for architecture for 2 years. Ended up transitioning to DePaul just for a financial benefit. After getting here and learning a lot more about the school and what it had to offer, I came across a few folks from the hospitality program. From there, was pretty much intrigued right away, especially with the revenue management side. The faculty here had a lot of knowledge about how revenue management worked. And it kind of worked out with my overall skill set and the way that I thought about business and numbers, and it really just clicked right away. So while going through the program, ended up at a rotational internship with the CVB, and then into an internship with revenue management with White Lodging. From there, was able to transition into a front office role, just trying to get a foundation in the hospitality area and make sure it was still the right fit for me. I really excelled at the front office, the customer service standpoint, and went into a front office manager role. From there, was poached by another company to go do revenue management. So finally got my foot in the door. doing area revenue management for First Hospitality Group, and then was able to go back to White Lodging a year later just because I saw more opportunity in terms of growth. Most recently was able to open up the Marriott Marquis here in Chicago.
It's a beautiful property.
It is. It's a immaculate property, 1,200 rooms, biggest hotel to open in 2017 for Marriott and in North America. So it was a really great opportunity to go work alongside the team there to get the property open. So that's where I've been ever since.
And right now you're the senior revenue manager for the Marriott Marquis.
I am, yeah. The day-to-day is on the transient side of the business. So Chicago has a really strong group presence, but the other side of the coin is the transient business. Being down by McCormick Place, we kind of have our odds stacked against us because there's not really a lot of transient drivers in that market. So it's been fun. It's been a learning experience to understand how the market reacts to different things, including a 1,200-room hotel opening up within.
So for those that are listening to this podcast, when you say transient, I want to not get too technical here. I mean, I think sitting around this table, we know what that means, but there are people that are listening right now that maybe don't know what that means, that will eventually want to go into this side of it. And when you say transient, what does that mean?
A transient guest is someone that's not affiliated with a group that might have some sort of meeting or a group of 10 or more people that are going to stay at a hotel. So we would see that as someone that has a special corporate rate, someone that does a AAA rate, a government rate, someone that's just booking through the varied channels that are out on whatever source you want to book on.
So even though your hotel is right there attached to McCormick Place, one of the largest convention centers in the world, that transient business is really important to the success of your hotel. So you're keenly focused on that business and bringing in that business to your hotel on a daily basis.
Yeah, we're always working on what we think is a good discount strategy and what's going to bring in the most amount of business at whatever time we can. Most recently, I guess a good example is BTS, who is a South Korean pop band, announced that they're going to play one of 3 shows in the United States at Soldier Field. Tickets went on sale Friday, March 1st.
Goodness.
And
tickets for that.
Overnight, yeah. Well, they sold out in 3 hours, so good luck. But we ended up picking up.
Jamie, we need to get tickets to that. We need to try to get them on the podcast.
You probably could.
I mean,
we ended up picking up like 150 rooms within a few hours too. So right along with it, it's a lot of it's monitoring those trends and just making sure that the hotel is positioned correctly to not get out of control.
So how do you monitor those trends? So are you looking at social media, or are you sitting in a bunker somewhere looking at hashtags? I mean, what are you doing to actually monitor the trends to say, oh my goodness, BTS just announced that they're going to do a concert at Soldier Field, one of 3 in the U.S. We need to shoot our rates up to be able to deal with this. Don't give away your trade secrets.
Yeah,
but
I'm trying to hold back as much as I can here.
Yeah.
A lot of it's word of mouth. It's how people figure out news on a regular basis. So some of it is social, some of it is driven by like Google alerts and things like that. But a lot of times we have enough people within the market, basically enough boots on the ground, that people, if they hear about these things, they're letting the people know that need to know, and the revenue managers are some of the first people that need to know to make the adjustments on the fly and get the hotel set up right.
That's great. So he talked a lot about transient, Matt, and how that impacts his business. I mean, talk to me a little bit about your business. I mean, he deals with groups and he deals with transient, but your customers are mainly the transients, the people that live here in Chicago. Is that something that you deal with? I mean, on a daily basis, what are the things that you deal with in terms of revenue and thinking about revenue and where your revenue streams are coming from?
Yeah, it's a little interesting. So I made, obviously, a transition here to Ramen-san in the past year, and Ramen-san and Osteria are 100% different businesses. At a ramen shop, I think that the vast majority of our clientele are people that are looking for, a warm bowl of soup and want to get into some comfort food, and maybe it's a spontaneous sort of feeling, or maybe it's something that they're thinking about all day, or whatever the case might be. But typically, our business is built almost exclusively on transient business. We don't have any catering spaces. We don't have any private rooms or things like that. So, our business is built on reservations and walk-ins, which I think would all fall into the transient sort of business. We don't have a ton of space for large parties either. We just have two tables that can accommodate groups over 10. So, our space is built all on transient, and I think that's posed some difficulties for us in growing. I think that the West Loop is a really exciting area to be in, but the concentration of people just isn't the same as it is in River North or maybe in the Gold Coast or some of the other areas that I think are more developed. And so I think that this area has posed some difficulties in finding those transient business, right? Like, is there people that live in that area? Are there residential buildings that I can interact with? Are there new office buildings that I can interact with? I think that's kind of how we built our business, at least at Ramen-san. But at Osteria, it was 100% different. It was built almost half on catering. It was something that we have rooms that could be sectioned off, and you could do a group as small as 10 or 12 in a private space, all the way up to weddings or corporate functions that are up to 250 people. So at Osteria, there was a lot more of that group business that we were kind of balancing, and what do you set for minimums for groups, or how do you garner long-term business with larger groups? Whereas, like I said, at Ramen-san, we just don't have that opportunity.
But you and I have talked about also, one of the things that you really like about working for Lettuce is the empowerment and the impact that you have. I mean, as general manager of Ramen-san, you and I have talked about the involvement that you have in the decision-making process, that you're very involved in that and you enjoy that aspect of it, that you've just opened this Ramen-san location and you enjoy that aspect of it, about whether it's the empowerment that you have or your involvement in the decision-making process working there. It seems like you've really found your niche where you're at right now.
Yeah, it's a position here that's challenging in ways that I haven't been challenged before, in that, the nice thing about Let Us Entertain You is as successful and large as we are in some lights, we also look at each individual restaurant as that. And I think that when you look at opening up a mom and pop shop, right, if I was going to open up a restaurant myself and find a location and sign a lease and open up a restaurant, it would be myself and my management team and my servers and the rest of my hourly team, and we would work that restaurant in a way that is very, I guess, individual, right? It's a very small unit, and even though Lettuce has 120 restaurants, my restaurant is still ran as a mom and pop restaurant, right? And so me being the GM, while I have opportunity to interact with a marketing team that works in our corporate office, or work with a design team that works at our corporate office, when it comes down to me making a decision on a marketing initiative or me making a menu change, it's a mom and pop place, right? We make it ourselves. We make that decision ourselves. So I get to wear hats that maybe are different than if I were working at a more, I guess, corporate place, where me as a manager, it's just, okay, I just come in and run the shift, right? We don't have a lot of managers like that. You always have responsibilities that are outside of your traditional just floor manager roles.
That's very different. I mean, what I always think is interesting about the two of you is the perspective you get, because you working at Let Us Entertain You is a relatively small organization when you put it in comparison to you, Ryan, working for Marriott, a very large organization. I mean, nearly 7,000 hotels. I mean, this is the largest hotel organization in the world. I mean, what do you find are some of the strengths and challenges that you face working for such a large organization like Marriott? But also, what are some of the advantages working for such a large organization?
I think some of the strengths of having a company that large is that you do have access to a lot of resources. Along with the resources, not only from a systems or operational or procedure standpoint, but you also have people. I think the people are probably the biggest asset that the company has, from the front of house to the back of house to the people that are in support, and like what I do, revenue management, sales, marketing. So the exposure to those people and the ability to move within the company and throughout the world, your opportunities are pretty much endless. So I think that that's a really great benefit to working with Marriott. From that, I would also say that you're also a small fish in a big pond. So you really have to put your best foot forward every day and make sure that you are coming to the table with some good opportunities or some good ideas, I should say, to keep your name and to keep yourself above water and just make sure that you're on other people's radars so your success has some longevity to it.
Interesting. What do you think are not for you, I mean, you've talked about some of the strengths and some of the advantages of working for a small organization. I mean, what do you think are some of the challenges that you face working for there are clearly large food and beverage organizations. I mean, the Lettuce has properties or restaurants all over the nation. Most of them are here in Chicago. What do you think are some of the challenges that you face working for a small organization compared to something the size of Marriott?
I think that sometimes the challenges, so Ryan and I have known each other for many years, and we've discussed this a few times along the line of, I'm pushing 10 years with my company, and Ryan has kind of jumped around in a few different places, and I think that, his jumps have been motivated by finding great opportunities, and, there's so many different places that you can go and work, and so many different opportunities that could be really ripe for an individual working for large organizations. And I think that working at a small organization sometimes limits your opportunities in some ways, right? And there's not, while we have 120 restaurants, it's only 120 restaurants. And I think that you find that as you grow with this company, that you find out that me as a 10-year employee is really just a drop in the bucket. I mean, we have an anniversary list that goes out monthly, and every month, 10 years is maybe the 10th category that they have down the list, right? There's people that are 30, 35, 25, 17 years with the company. And I think that working in a place like that, at some points you hit a ceiling, and you have to kind of slow your growth for a moment, right? Or maybe bring it back down to earth and realize that the reason that I'm working here is not necessarily just to keep growing my position at time after time after time, but that what I'm doing here is growing my relationship with the brand and my relationship with the company. And I think that sometimes that poses that challenge because you get, for young, I guess, enthusiastic employees, sometimes having that ceiling, if it's early on in your career, might be discouraging, right? And maybe you're like, okay, I want to move on because I'm not being utilized to the way that I should be, or my potential is not being tapped into like it needs to be, and I'm wasting my time. So then the people want to move, right? And I think that I guess is one of the bigger challenges with working for a small organization, is that the opportunities aren't as ubiquitous as they are in a larger organization.
I do think, though, it's interesting you touched on the 10-year anniversary, and you're one of the 10th categories, and maybe you're on the 7th page of that distribution. But I think one of the similarities for both of the companies, regardless of how small or large, is the culture that both of them built or have built around the people over the last however many years they've been in operation. So I think that's a kind of a cool thing to be able to draw the conclusion between the two, that it's, at the end of the day, our hospitality companies are about the people and the internal hospitality just as much as it is the external hospitality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. And it's interesting that we have the two of you sitting here today, because whether it's the associates at Marriott or the culture of caring at Lettuce, you can't make an assumption that one is necessarily better than the other. It's just two dramatically different approaches to the way in which the way you approach human resources. And they're each their own. And one is not better than the other. They're just different. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of what we try to tell students when they finish up their academic program here is you have to find the one that fits for you. I mean, Matt, you've clearly found one that fits for you with Lettuce, and Ryan, you've kind of found one that fits for you at Marriott. I mean, And I think so much of what students do, and I encourage them to do, is try to find that match and try to find the one that fits for them. I mean, what's some advice that you would kind of give students on things to look for in an organization when they go out and they're a junior, they're a senior, and they're starting to go out and start that selection process? They're going through the recruitment process.
I think our opinions might differ a little bit more.
And that's fine.
This is where we.
I would rather they differ, because you're looking at it from the perspective of the individual, but you're also looking at it from the perspective of two very different industries.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that. So I guess my personal standpoint on it has always been go where you're going to see the most growth potential and most opportunity.
That's a true revenue manager speaking.
Right. So when I got involved with White Lodging initially, they gave me a great opportunity to get a foundation in terms of the revenue management internship, as well as the front office experience that I was getting. What I didn't see was the opportunity to make a transition from front office to revenue management within the confines and within the structure that was there. And having the opportunity, or having another company knock on your door and say, hey, do you want to try it? As a recent grad, as an ambitious person, I couldn't say no. I couldn't pass up the opportunity to finally start developing that skill set. From there, it just opened other doors for me. The advice that I would have is don't limit yourself. Depending, I think it's situational for everyone. It's going to be. There's a lot of factors that are going to play into it. What's going on in your personal life? What are your goals long term? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to live? There's so much that goes into it. So the advice, I think, it would be to not hold yourself back from taking a chance while you're young in your career. I think that's the time when you can make mistakes and you can learn the most about what a career looks like for you in the long run.
And making mistakes isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
I mean, making mistakes can actually be an incredibly powerful, beneficial thing if the mistake is handled correctly.
Yeah, I think they're always justifiable in one way or another.
For me, it was a little bit different because I had already been working for the company that I ended up taking a career with after I got out of school. And I think that one of the things that allowed me to do that, so before I worked at Lettuce, I worked at P.F. Chang's, as I mentioned, and then I worked at a really small mom and pop restaurant that was an individual place and long history, been open for over 100 years.
Denny's?
And no, it's called Long Grove Village Tavern.
Oh, nice.
Longest liquor license in Illinois.
Wow.
They used to sell out of like a horse stable back in the 1800s. Insane. But anyway, so I ended up taking a job there.
That fun fact was brought to you by the Hospitality Spirit.
Put them in plug. So anyway, so I took a job there, and after working for P.F. Chang's, so P.F. Chang's is an even larger organization than Let Us Entertain You is. And so I worked there, and after leaving there, I wanted a small mom and pop place that I could get a little bit more hands-on, deeper sort of insight into the business. And so I worked there, and then I ended up building a connection with a regular that had worked for Let Us Entertain You that ended up getting my job where I work now. But I think that when I was working in those places, the reason that I was motivated to try different opportunities is that I wanted to see, what the perspective of a big organization like P.F. Chang's is, right? And then a really small organization like a mom and pop restaurant. And I found Lettuce as kind of the, Goldilocks, I guess. But I also had, growing up in Chicago, had this sort of romantic view or idea of what Let Us Entertain You was. And, my grandma was very proud when she found out that I got a job at Let Us Entertain You, because they had created this, in Chicago, created a reputation that was top notch. And so when I had the opportunity to work for them, I took that right away. And I told myself pretty early on that I wasn't going to leave the organization until I got at least to be GM. That was my goal. I felt that if I got a job with a really great company and I put my time in and could grow my career, I set the goal as I need to be GM before I leave this company. I felt like that was what I wanted to, I guess, milk out of that opportunity. And so from there, I think it kind of created this opportunity for me to focus on what I wanted to do. If I knew that I wanted to be GM, I constantly was just working to continue to move up to that point, right? So I never had an interest in taking another job. So regardless of who, hit me up and offered me different opportunities, I was always focused on accomplishing the goal of becoming GM here. And I think that was a shift from someone that was, like Ryan, where you wanted to just take opportunities, right, and find the way to get to the top, or not to the top, but at least to continue to grow that, or whatever company it was with, whereas I made the decision to grow with the one company I was with and get to the position that I wanted there.
Interesting. What do you say? I got a bunch of questions I want to ask here. I'm just trying to figure out the best way to order them. I want to maybe focus. You briefly touched on what opportunities that you've kind of had other opportunities, but you were very loyal to the organization. You were very loyal to Lettuce.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I'm curious about, and how do you deal with that? I mean, how do you deal with this idea that there's lots of opportunity? I mean, in hospitality, there are so many different directions that you can go. I mean, there's so many opportunities that seem to come on that are presented to you. I mean, that's just the nature of the industry, that there's lots of opportunity for both horizontal and vertical movement continuously. How do you manage that process? I mean, how do you manage the constant onslaught of, hey, I've got an opportunity, are you interested? I've got an opportunity, are you interested? I've got an opportunity, are you interested? How do you remain on the same course? I mean, I think our students are going to have to deal with that. I mean, the students might say that's a great problem to have, lots of opportunities to present themselves, but the reality is they're going to be faced with that challenge when they go out into the industry.
Yeah, and I think that, in the age of LinkedIn and social media in general, there's just a lot more access to information about who you are, where you're working, and if there's a job that they're looking to fill, there's a really easy avenue to be able to find a candidate. And I'll be quite honest, it's not easy to find restaurant managers. It's not easy to find people that are interested in dedicating their life to a restaurant to be a manager. And if you're that person, other people that are running restaurants that are looking for managers are going to say, hey, I have an opportunity, come and work with me.
Particularly ones that have worked in markets like this.
Absolutely. And so for me, I certainly don't want to my own horn or anything, but I get a LinkedIn message more than once a week about a job opportunity that I could go work. And most of the job opportunities have headlines that are $5 to $10 to $15 more than what I'm making right now. And that's enticing, right? And so I think that I've consistently I've opened my mail and looked at the opportunity and said, oh, what is this? But I think that when you find a company that you align with as far as values and other things go, that every opportunity that showed up to me, if it was something that I could look up, I looked it up, right? And I looked up the company, I looked at who the person was that is trying to interact with me, and almost all of the opportunities that I see don't have the same confidence that I have in staying with the company that I have now, right? Like, restaurants open and close day in and day out, and when you work for a company that has had restaurants that are open for 45 years, they're doing something right. And I think that just because there's a better opportunity or better, quote unquote, more money or more enticing opportunity, doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to progress your career.
Yeah. I don't know if you can necessarily put a price on security, put a price on high internal service quality, culture, loyalty. I mean, those are the intangibles that you can't necessarily put a price on. That's good to hear. That's really, really good to hear. Ryan, what about you? Any thoughts on that?
I've moved around in my career, like made 3 or 4 jumps to try to get to an end goal. So I think that for me, it's been more about what that goal has always been and what are my short-term and long-term goals, and how I'm going to get there. And is if I get a message like that from someone, I'm thinking to myself, is this opportunity holistically going to be better than the position I'm in now? When I came to the Marquee, when I came to open this, I knew on paper that I have many different positions that I've held in the last 5 years. So I knew that I needed to commit myself to an organization. And when I went through that process of onboarding, I actually told my director, I said, this is a company that I want to be loyal to. I don't want to make these moves. I need to show longevity in my career so that these companies or different hotels that I want to work with within the brand start seeing that loyalty and seeing that the tenure has been established with the company, that I'm there for the long haul.
That's great.
And I think also maybe there's a difference in the industries, right, that we're in that hotels and restaurants are run with different organizations. There's not a ton of big hotel groups that are running super exciting places, whereas in hotels, Marriott and Hyatt and some of the other bigger names, the opportunities I think are different in that if you want to stay in a particular market in the hotel industry, you almost by necessity have to move companies. Whereas if you want to grow with a hotel company and stay with them, you move cities.
Restaurant company. Hotel company?
With hotel companies, right? You move cities from, if you want to move up in an organization, Marriott, for example.
Right.
At some point, you're going to get to a point where you've kind of maxed out the market. And if you want to take the next step in your career, you have to move to a new city if you want to stay with that company, right? Otherwise, you find a new company in the same city, and that has that next opportunity. And I think that in restaurants, you can work with the same company in the same market and continue to grow a little bit easier than if you stay at some point in the hierarchy, I guess.
Because they have like a stronger established cluster in most cases. And yeah.
I would say also within hotels, if you have more flexibility in terms of what job function you have within that hotel, and I would probably say within restaurants, you're probably going to be a little bit more limited in terms of, okay, you're going to go to a front of the house position, and you're probably going to be somewhat limited in terms of the quantity of positions that will be available within that restaurant company. Whereas if you go into a hotel and it's a full-service hotel, the quantity of positions that will be available if you have flexibility in your job function are going to be larger in quantity.
Absolutely.
So at the Marquee, an operations level position in front of the house, there's going to be a lot more positions in terms of them. You go housekeeping, you go front office, you go room res, you go that. So it's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think it's interesting with some of the people that I work alongside that have transitioned their careers from different disciplines within the hotel. I mean, going from front office to housekeeping to events to stewarding to you can go so many different directions within the organization or within even the four walls itself, because the people there understand your skill set and you've developed a rapport with the people around you that your skills in one area could transition to another one very easily. So yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying there.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm always curious because I see people that are really strong F&B people. I don't see as much transition of people that are 100% F&B like you are, Matt, that go into the hotel industry. I see people that like food and beverage but are kind of in the hotel industry already that are F&B people. Whereas you're kind of cut from the F&B cloth and you're kind of in freestanding F&B and with F&B companies.
Yeah, and I think that you're starting to see a little bit of change in this, but I think for the most part, just putting it out there, food and beverage outlets at most hotels are loss leaders, right? They're not
100%.
making money for the property. They're not something that is a driver of bottom line growth for most hotels. Yep. So by design, they just don't invest in it the same way. It's not something that they are really excited to expand and continue to grow. And you do see a little difference, with places like Kimpton. I think that Kimpton's food and beverage operations across the board are higher level than a lot of other hotel groups that are out there.
With the exception of catering and events.
Yeah, but with the exception of catering, events, and weddings and things like that, you're not seeing culinary-driven restaurants in hotels for the most part, unless it's contracted out, right? And we have a relationship with White Lodging, Let Us Entertain You does, that we have some restaurants that are in their properties, and we do the food and beverage for them because they realize that that's our specialty, and their specialty is not. Yeah, and so I think that more of the food and beverage, cut from that cloth, like you say, I think that they tend to gravitate towards food and beverage focused operations because that's where they get the opportunity to be creative and actually have an impact on bottom line growth.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious of people that are listening to this right now that are maybe thinking about transitioning into this for their career, kind of what you two do. I want to focus a little bit on kind of what a typical week in the life might be like, or a day in the life. Because I know let's maybe focus on a typical day for what you might do. Ryan, let's start with you. What is a typical, I know no day is typical for you. What does a typical day of a senior revenue manager for one of the largest properties in Chicago look like?
My day consists of mostly trying to identify new trends within the market, any kind of movement that we've seen within our own hotel, any kind of price jumps that might be happening within the market, touching back on the events that spring up as they do in Chicago. And then from there, putting all of the data together for our ownership groups, for our executive leaderships, just for leadership across the hotel so they understand what is going to be happening in the next however many months and any data that might be relevant to them. For our operations teams, we're looking at the amount of arrivals and departures so they can staff their departments accordingly. And then just a lot of other odds and ends projects, deep dives, just looking into certain areas that we think might be an opportunity. And then making sure that our transient and our group business are aligned in one way or another so the hotel just remains profitable and successful.
Are you kind of on your own individual island, or are you working with the other Marriotts in town? Are you competing against them? Do you have a team of people that you're working with?
I work with a team of 4 people. So we have a group strategy team, a function space strategy team, myself who oversees the transient, and then a director that's kind of leading the way for the whole team. Our relationship with the market hotels is great. I think that we have continued to push the market and push the envelope in terms of rate. It's kind of been a strategy. We know opening a hotel that big, there could be some rate erosion within the market because people are scared about the increase in supply. So I think that was part of what we did initially before we opened, was developing some relationships and talking about some of the business and the citywide conventions that we were going to see in the year. But yeah, we're always competing against everybody. You're at the end of the day, your objective as a revenue manager is to grow your RevPAR and to grow the share that you are getting of the market and what kind of business exists within it.
Are you working 24/7, 365? It seems like you have to.
No, I take a lot of time off. I play a lot of golf.
But it seems like for that job, you have to kind of constantly be watching.
You do, yeah. You've got to have a finger on the pulse all the time. So you're definitely connected throughout, 365, 24/7. So there are times when it's busier than it's not, and there's also times when it's kind of slow. The seasonality of Chicago really helps with that. It gives us a lot of time to regroup, and if we don't have, a lot of stuff going on in the hotel, whether it's meetings, whether it's a convention, whether it's just a busy transient weekend, it gives us a time to breathe a little bit, to get back to the basics and just make sure we're doing everything right.
What areas of the hotel do you interact with the most?
I would say it's a combination between, there's 3 probably leading departments that I work with most. I'd say on the least end, it's probably food and beverage. There's not really a lot of opportunity for us to get involved with that. The chefs are taking care of the menu pricing. They're taking care of all their purchasing, controlling costs. So we don't have any involvement with that. I think what we look most to is, I guess it'll start with our group teams that are booking the business. From there, we're making sure that projections or our forecasts are accurate with our events teams, because they're in charge of, they're the ones speaking with the clients on a regular basis, understanding what the different programs look like for the hotel and how successful they're going to be. And then we're speaking a lot with the front office team as it relates to oversells, arrival and departure patterns, and what we're trying to do in terms of an overall strategy to get the hotel filled and to keep them busy.
Great. Matt, what about you? What's a day in the life? I think you probably arrive a little bit later at work than Ryan does, obviously.
Most days, no.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so I do as the GM, I do both ends of the spectrum as far as schedule goes. So I have 3 managers on my team, myself and 2 others, and one of them works 5 closes a week. One of them works 5 opens a week, and then I do 2 opens, 2 closes, and a mid. So I fill in the gap. So on opens, we get in at 7 a.m., and that's definitely earlier than Ryan gets in. But we'll get in at 7 a.m. and
No comment.
We'll basically just,
unless he's playing golf, he gets that early tee time.
Right? Yeah. Then
That's how I get the golf in before work. I get
early
the
in
tee times.
only if you're golfing.
Yeah.
So we go in there. We have led us a very well-developed or tight systems that we operate off of. And so the morning time is really, I think the opening shift is a little bit more regimented than the close shift is. But the opening shift is, come in, we do a walkthrough, basically counting all the food that we have on hand. We do it with the manager and a chef together. So we'll walk through everything, sit down, we'll grab prep sheets to help set up the team for the day. We'll walk through, we'll set bar levels and get everything kind of working in that department. And then from there, you look at staffing. We make sure that, we have enough people to run the restaurant. And if there's, unexpected business, you work to fill those gaps. Or if there's not enough business, then you cut and you reduce staff. And then from there, that kind of gives me a little gap in the middle of the morning before we open for lunch service. So I'll work on any sorts of projects that I'm working on. It could be anything from marketing to some financial, documents or things like that. And then kind of moving on, we open up for lunch. So as the opener, you run lunch. That's kind of your service that you focus on. So as you run lunch, you could be super busy, you could be slow, who knows. But then by the time the afternoon rolls around, you're setting up again for dinner service, and you're finishing, staffing levels and specials for the day and pre-shift notes, and then you run pre-shift, you get the staff kind of amped up for the day, and then see what comes for dinner service. And then a lot of it at the end of the night is some financial finishing things up and just sort of closing out the day. But I think that as my day or my role has progressed, my day has changed quite a bit. In that, when you're first entering the management realm, it's a lot of just executing, right? It's, hey, you have service coming in today. There's 200 reservations. You have this amount of big parties, and get the shift through smoothly. Whereas now that I've moved into the GM role, at the end of the day, my bosses look to see, are there more sales coming in or less sales coming in? That's how my sort of scorecard is written. So that's posed some challenges in figuring out how do you market a new restaurant, how do you garner relationships at different places, and that's kind of been the biggest challenge of my day-to-day right now.
How about you, Nick? What's outside of directing the Spirit of Hospitality, producing and orchestrating?
Oh, I don't produce it. Jamie produces it.
Well, Jamie's the man behind the scenes.
He's the master.
What's your day look like? I think people would be interested to know what you do on a day-to-day.
On a day-to-day, do a couple things. So I'm still a faculty member. I mean, I'm at the core. I think a lot of people fail to realize that the director of the school is still at my core. I'm still a teacher. So I still teach classes here. But a lot of what I also do is I have oversight of the faculty and all the academics here at the school, and still all the co-curricular programming. So all the mentor program that we have and the staff here, and put the schedule together and manage that aspect of it. And so everything from study abroad to the every aspect of that. So I got to make sure that at the end of the day, the school still kind of runs, the lights are turned on and things like that. So we're not a very big school. We're kind of a boutique program, but I like to say that at the end of the day, we're the premier urban-based hospitality program in North America. So
couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it's a nice experience. If I tell people all the time, if you had asked me would I be a teacher when I graduated from a hotel school, I would have said no way. But I absolutely love what I'm doing here. It's a cool place. What do you guys think? What do you guys, when you were in school here, what do you think was the aspect that you look back and you're like, that was the thing that I didn't think that I would need, that I now look back and say, yep, that was.
For me, I think it comes down to the people that you were surrounded by.
So the relationships that you formed?
I don't know if it was as much of the relationships as it was the spirit of entrepreneur. It was the spirit of hospitality first and foremost, but it was really the spirit of entrepreneurship and the way that people had ambitions to just get out there in the world. And maybe it was just, being 21, 22 years old and just really had ambition at that point in life. And I don't think that that's died out. I think that that was something that the school itself really fueled and harbored, and everything, within as small as this boutique program is, we are, the few people that you surrounded yourself with really instilled that drive. And I think that's kind of what I look back at and say, this is, that is one of the main reasons that I'm glad that I spent as much time here as I did. And it's also the reason that I keep on coming back to do the mentorship program and stay involved with the school and try to, keep up with the students, just to figure out what they want and give them a real life perspective on how to continue using that drive to get ahead. I
think and we appreciate that. And I think part of it too is where we're located.
Absolutely.
I think the fact that, I say it kind of tongue in cheek at the intro, recorded live at the Corner State in Jackson, but where we're located here, a stone's throw from all the great restaurants in the West Loop and all the great hotels in River North and here in the Loop and down in kind of the South Loop area where you are, Ryan, down at McCormick. I mean, it is truly a living laboratory for hospitality students to learn about this. It makes it so easy for us to have 2 internships and to do field trips and to bring in guest speakers in classes and the speaker series class. And, we always kind of laugh with when we designed the mentorship program here that we thought that we would have, 5 or 6 students, maybe 10 students participate, and then all of a sudden we have 60. Because it's so easy to do of where we're located and to be able to have that much engagement and to be able to learn about what I think is the greatest industry in the world in a place like this is tremendous.
Yeah, the location is second to none. I mean, you can go to any of the top tier hospitality schools, top tier, by USA Today poll or whatever it is. But those are places that are not surrounded with this magnitude of opportunity for anybody.
And it's nice because it's interesting to watch it grow. I mean, just take where Matt is, just Ramen San. I mean, I remember when the first Ramen San opened, and to sit here and watch it grow into what it is today, and to now sit here and say, okay, I remember when the first Ramen San opened, and now we've got the Ramen San in West Loop, and a student in the hospitality program that I run is the GM of the West Loop in the West Loop location. That's pretty friggin' cool to be able to say. And to watch that kind of linear and longitudinal growth of that, there's a sense of pride in that to be able to say. And to say that, okay, we've got this beautiful Marriott that just opened up, and to say that, okay, one of the students from this program that we have here, this small 250-room program, one of our students is the senior revenue manager down there. That's pretty friggin' cool to be able to say. So we might be a small program, but the footprint that we have and the program that we've made, the footprint that we've created, next year will be our 10-year anniversary.
That's great.
Of our program, and to be able to say that and what we've done in 10 years, I think is pretty tremendous.
Yeah, I mean, even what are we, 5 years out the door, 6 years out the door from walking across the stage here, and the opportunities I think for both of us that have been presented, just from various different companies within, have been tremendous, just because of the amount of respect that the program has itself.
Well, and I find that it's interesting that the growth is only just really beginning. I mean, there's so, we, in years in my class, we had 35, 40 kids that graduated from our particular program. And now how many are you up to?
We're still about that.
Yeah.
In terms of graduating. Yeah.
Okay. So I just think that it's kind of amazing that for us, and that doesn't include minors, right? Mm-hmm. Because from my perspective, we do an internship program for Let Us Entertain You, and we have branding days that are here in DePaul, and we end up finding that I have some relationships with the people that are in the corporate office that talk to me about DePaul's students that are coming into them, right? And I think that us being able to continue to have, I don't know if it's a farm system of sorts.
It's like a farm team.
Yeah,
no, it is.
It's you're growing that the industries that are here that are either have legs or gaining legs as far as groups in Chicago go, whether in hotels or in restaurants or special events or whatever the case might be. I think that having this sort of group of people that the industry trusts or believes that are going to come in and be players for them, I think that promotes growth. It promotes longevity for the other companies that are here as well. So it's kind of a dual-edged sword.
How important was? Maybe let's wrap up on this question. I mean, I'm really curious. I mean, I love the fact that the two of you have stayed in contact so much, and I tell this to students all the time about the importance of networking and building relationships and keeping your professional network strong. I mean, perhaps let's end on kind of some feedback that you have on the importance of professional networks and why that skill is so important for students to hone as they head out into the work.
Look, there's
into their professional life.
Age-old adage that says, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I think that, for me, I even talked about it a little bit earlier. And, the reason that I got a job at Let Us Entertain You is a regular that I had at my prior job. And I think that, recognizing that it's important to grow connections, it's important to get involved with things that are outside of just your day-to-day life. And I think that, both of us, how long has the mentor program been going on?
2 years.
Yeah, so we started both at the beginning of that, and I think that we've grown some nice connections from that. But I think that for the students, it's probably more beneficial than it is, for us in that particular experience, and that they have someone in their back pocket that's like, hey, I can reach out to Ryan or I can reach out to Matt and know that we're out there and we know people, and hey, I'm interviewing for this thing. They said that, they know you. It's like, it's amazing, I think, as we progress through our jobs. And I think, in Lettuce you see it, but I think for you as well in your career that you run into people that, oh, you worked with that person at this property those years? Well, that's amazing. I worked with them at this property this many years. And then you're like, oh, wow. And, it ends up being that 6 degrees of separation. And you end up knowing a ton of people that end up working with one another. And I think that that's something that in Chicago it works great. I think in other markets it works great in that you talk with people, you connect with people, and you never know what that connection is going to, parlay or not parlay into later in life.
It's like hospitality is a big, happy family, good and bad.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I 100% agree with all that. And I think that to go along with it, it's kind of what you were talking about, how everyone knows everyone. Really, as big as this industry is worldwide, if I were to go seek out a job for, somewhere across the world, there's a really good chance that someone that works wherever that place is going to know someone that I've worked with in the last year and a half or 2 years, and be able to get a good idea of what my work ethic is, anything that I like accomplished and things like that. So for us, I mean, the reason I think we've stayed connected for this long, not only the relationship we developed here, but it was always fun, like working Friday nights at the hotel and have guests looking for places to go. And Matt's restaurant is 4 blocks away. And I'm calling him like, hey, man, I know it's Friday night and, it's the middle of summer and there's this convention in town, but you think you could squeeze in this party at 10? They really want to come to your restaurant.
Party at 10 on a Friday.
Yeah. But we make it happen.
And he'd make it happen, and I knew that I could rely on the service that those people were going to get at his restaurant. And, you continue to hang out outside of work in the service industry, and you meet people that are in the service industry and other disciplines, and, your web continues to grow so greatly that if you ever end up in a bad situation or a good situation, you have an opportunity to offer somebody else that opportunity that you might have, or if you're looking for one, to seek out those people to find a backup plan for yourself.
That's great to hear. I'm glad you guys have stayed connected. It makes me happy to see, and I've really enjoyed having you guys here today. It's really been a nice conversation to have. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, it's been fun. Thanks.
Well, recorded live at the Corner Estate in Jackson, this is Dr. Nicholas Thomas. Thanks so much for listening to The Hospitality Spirit. I hope you enjoyed.